Hello everyone, this is going to be part 1 of an in-depth tutorial on how to make custom levels in MADNESS Project Nexus. I'm making this tutorial because the amount of things that you can do in this is quite extensive, and if you're like me who jumped into this, having little to no experience with Unity and also not being the biggest fan of reading, chances are getting into custom level making might feel a little intimidating, and trying to understand how it all works is quite overwhelming. And as somebody with 3 months worth of experience, while not exactly being a guru on how it all works, I do have at the very least enough experience to go into autistic detail on how a lot of it works, and maybe give my own tips and tricks on making the rooms work the way you want them to. Now, a couple things real quick I want to mention before we get into the nitty-gritty of things is that the scene tools itself is still actively in development as of the posting of this video, and the version of the scene tools that I'm using is from beta 2.14.g, I think it is. So chances are if I miss like a certain feature, like a certain marker, zone, or proxy, that's why, and it'll likely be covered in a future video, so don't worry. But with that being said, let's jump right into the tutorial. Now, the first step is getting the scene tools itself set up. We're going to need a specific version of Unity, the scene tools itself, and the MAD card maker. If you've already got the scene tools set up and going, then you can skip to the timestamp posted here. But if not, here's what we're going to do. So, the devs were kind enough to give us a Google Doc list containing all of the tools and tutorials that we can use to mod the game. This Google Doc can be found in the description, go ahead and click on that link. Now, the insane amount of links on this might be a little overwhelming, and we will get to some of these eventually, but for right now, the two main links that we want to click on are the MAD card maker and the MPN scene tools. Starting with the MAD card maker, we're going to hit the download button right here on the top right corner, and that's it. So while that's downloading, we're going to move on to the scene tools page. We're going to hit code and download zip. After that, we're going to scroll down a bit here and click on this link right here. Here we're going to hit 2019, track down the version that says 2019.2.16F1. I'm actually going to cheat a little bit, bear with me for a second. Regardless of how you find it, once we do eventually track down the right version, we're going to hit install. Now, at this point, we should have 3 files downloaded in my files. I'm going to cheat. Well, I've already got them downloaded, so I'm going to move to another file real quick with it. But anyways, we're going to extract the files in these folders one at a time. Once that's done, we're then going to install Unity, which I'm not going to do because I've already got it installed, but the setup is... Once that's finished up, we're then going to open up Unity app here. At this point, one of two things will happen. The first outcome, you'll get a pop-up from Unity basically recommending Unity Hub. If you don't have Unity Hub, that's what's going to pop up. But anyways, we're going to hit open project. At this point, we're going to track down our scene tools here, and then select the first folder inside the scene tools folder and whatnot. But the other outcome that could happen is if you downloaded Unity Hub. If you don't have an account, then they may try and make you create an account. If so, go ahead and make one real quick. It's been a hot minute since I've actually created one. I don't imagine it'd be too bad, but yeah, go ahead and get that made. At this point, we're gonna once you get to this window right here, we're gonna hit add and then add project from disk. At this point, we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna track down our scene tools and then select the first folder inside it. After that, the scene tools should pop up in this little thingamajig right here. At that point, we're gonna single click it, and the scene tools should pop up after a couple seconds. Now this is where the real fun begins. Being as we're now in Unity, I feel like now is a good time to kind of talk about how to navigate this. The 4 windows that we're going to be using the most often are the hierarchy window, which houses all of our rooms and objects inside the scene, the inspector window, which allows you to manipulate and change the setting of said objects, the project window, which is basically Unity's version of the file explorer within the scene, and then lastly the scene window, which, I mean, honestly, it's pretty self-explanatory. With all of these windows, you can make them as big or small as you want. You can move them wherever you want, and if you somehow happen to lose one of these windows, you can bring them back by going over to one of these tabs, right-clicking, and then selecting the tab that you end up losing. With that out of the way, I think it's time to actually start making rooms, yeah? The first thing that we're going to do is not delete the camera and light. Instead, we're actually going to come over here to Untitled, right-click, and hit Save Scene. Here, we're going to name our level, and whatever we name it, we're going to end it with _PG. Exactly like this. If it's anything other than this, even if it's lowercase, it won't show up in game. After that, now we delete the camera and replace it with a floor by going over to our hierarchy window, right-clicking, going to 3D objects, and then hit plane. We're gonna get it up to level, get it squared to the center here, maybe scale a little bigger. Yeah, that's probably good enough for right now. So after that, we're going to move over to the project tab over here and click on all prefabs, which isn't here on my end because a little while back I ended up deleting mine by complete accident, like a complete utter dumbass. But let's just pretend it's there for a minute, right? Just bear with me for a second. Well, what we're going to be looking for is room layout. It looks like this, and we're basically going to drag it into the scene window and we're going to put that blue pointy thing in the center like so. Then we're going to track down this green thing called player start. We're going to drag him onto our plane as well. Then we're going to circle back over to our hierarchy tab and then click on the arrow next to room layout, drag our plane into background, drag our player into characters. Then we're going to select our room layout, scroll all the way down to the inspector tab, and then hit visuals. And that's it. This is the bare minimum that we need to do to get our level working properly. Whatever we add in at this point, whatever we put in at this point, we're just adding to it. So at this point, if you want to try your level out, see how it looks, you're going to go over to the project window, click on assets, scenes, select the Unity logo that says sample playground. This is a complete and utter different scene that we don't need. Go over to the bottom right corner and replace my custom scene with none. After that, go over to the name of your custom scene, bottom right corner, hit new. Give it whatever name you want. Fortunately, we don't need the PG suffix for this one, so name it whatever you want. After that, we're gonna swing it over to we're gonna swing it over to the top left corner here. Click on Madness and build. Now, how long this part will take ultimately depends on the size of your scene. The more stuff you put in this, the longer it'll take, but being as how it's literally just a floor and your character, this should go by pretty quickly. So now we're going to move this out of here and put it in a place where we're not going to lose it. And now we're going to move over to Mad Card Maker. We're going to open up Mad Card Maker by double clicking on madcardmaker.exe. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into the workings of Mad Card Maker just yet, mainly because it's an entire beast in its own right that we will get back to later. But for right now, we're simply going to click on the plus sign right here, and what this will basically do is create the folder that we need to have our custom level show up in MADNESS Project Nexus. So for now, I'm just going to name our folder like so. Leave it at that and mod it up. And that's pretty much all we need to do inside Mad Card Maker. We can go ahead and close out of this. Now we're going to go over to our custom level right here, cut it, and then track down the folder that we just created, which is going to be located in this PC, OS, users, basically your username, app data, local low, Giving Tree, Madness Project Nexus, and lastly, mods. Here, we're going to go into the folder that we made and paste our level into it. At this point, now we're going to move over to Steam and make sure the game is on release beta, which mine is, but in case if you don't know, this is where it's going to be at, because like you can't play your level otherwise. So once the game gets done updating, we're gonna boot into Madness Project Nexus. Simple as that. Alright, so once we finally get into Madness Project Nexus, we're gonna go over to the cog over here, track down our mod, enable it, and then hit apply. Now this might take a minute, especially since I've got like maybe 6 dozen mods also enabled as well. So once that finishes up, we're going to move over to Playground. Once that loads up, we're going to move over to here towards the custom stages, track down our level, and then load it. And granted, I did everything right. It should load up the character and the plane, which it did. Thank God. And so now, like I mentioned at this point too, this is basically the bare minimum that we need to do, and whatever we put in here, we're just adding on to it. So let's go ahead and get out of here and move back over to Unity. Alright, so now that we're back in Unity, I feel like the most appropriate thing to add to this are walls. So what we're going to do is move back over to the Hierarchy tab and click on 3D objects again. Now, we do have a couple of options on what we can use, like cubes and whatnot, but what I'm going to be using is quads, simply because they just look better for what we're trying to do. Now, quads, what they basically do is stop you and other characters from crossing through in one direction. You can cross through one side, but you cannot cross on the other. So with that being said, when you're using them for walls, it's important that they're facing in the right direction, so that way you and other enemies can't fall out of the room simply by walking through. And one of the other things that I like to do when it comes to making rooms and whatnot, you don't have to do exactly like what I do. I basically make the positions of where they are as simple as possible, so that way I can make the edges and corners of the room nice and flush, and they're not like sticking out from one another like a sore thumb. Also, for the sake of time, I'm also going to be copying and pasting these quads, kind of rotating them to where they're facing the right direction, just so that way we have enough time to get to the other stuff like proxies, markers, and all that other stuff. Here, give me 1 second while I finish this up real quick. Alrighty, so now that we have our walls up, I'm going to go ahead and add a ceiling, which I'll just copy and paste the floor, rotate it 180 degrees, and then move it up to the top here. Now, when you're making your room, whether you're using quads or planes like I am, or you're just simply using nothing but cubes, you may come across a problem where a 3D object is casting a shadow when it shouldn't. I'll go ahead and show you what that looks like real quick. And the ceiling will potentially be the first time you come across a problem like this. And fortunately, there's an easy fix for this. Now, with your ceiling selected, you're going to go over to the inspector window, track down mesh renderer, and then turn cast shadows off. Simple problem, simple solution. Be sure to keep the mesh renderer in the back of your mind, because we will coming back to this later. Now, with our room fully constructed, I feel like now is a good time to give these quads and planes a name, just so that way we can keep track of what is what.
So in that case, let me get this finished up real quick. Give me 1 second. Alright, so now that we have everything named and whatnot, now we're going to add a little bit of logic to our room. So, what we're going to do is select all of our walls and ceilings here, hold control and left click to do this, swing back over to the inspector and open up layers here. Now, we will go over what each and every one of these do in the future, but for right now, we're going to go for terrain. Now, what terrain basically does is stop your crosshair objects, projectiles like bullets and rockets from passing through. And it also blocks the enemies' lines of sight or whatever. So you could potentially use this for like stealth missions and whatnot. Anyways, while we still have these selected, we're also going to go ahead and check that static box as well, which basically tells Unity that these objects are not going to move, and it also stops these 3D objects from causing weird issues in the future, because apparently that is a thing. But regardless, now we're gonna select our floor and do the same thing that we did to the walls. Only for the floor, we're also gonna go over to tags and click on floor. And what this will do is basically make it possible for enemies to not only spawn on this, but also make it possible to navigate it around waypoints, which we will get to those later. Now, for one more thing I want to do real quick before we start filling this in with like doors and enemies and whatnot is add some textures. Now, fortunately, the scene tools does come with some textures that you can use to paint these walls and whatnot. So what we're going to do is go back over to the project window, click on library, and then textures. Or materials, sorry, my bad. From here, we'll make a texture. Yeah, from here we'll take a texture, it doesn't matter which one, and then drag it on whatever object we want to paint. So let's say we'll have a bathroom tile floor, maybe have some concrete walls. What else do we have here? Well, I guess we'll make a gravel ceiling, why not? That's good enough for right now. But anyways, if you want to add your own textures to this as well, what you can also do is simply go over to File Explorer, grab whatever PNG you want, drag it into the project window, and then simply slap that image onto the 3D object of your choosing. Now, you may have noticed earlier that this wall in particular was pitch black, and while the textures we slapped on here before already changed the shaders for this wall, let's just say we slapped our own custom texture onto here and it's still pitch black or whatever. How do we fix that? Well, what we're going to do is swing back over to the inspector window again and move over to this circle right here. What we're going to do is change the shader from standard to madness, then terrain general. As you just saw, there are a lot of options for shaders and whatnot, and we will eventually go over what each individual one does. Now, with our room fully textured, I think it's time to start filling in this room with some stuff. We're going to go back to assets, library, prefabs, and lastly, proxies. Say hello to the proxies. Now, before we can start adding enemies into this, we need to give them a place to spawn in from. So we're going to take a door here, drag it into our room, and yeah. Now anyways, when it comes to rotating doors, be sure to have the blue arrow on it facing towards the wall. Otherwise, when you go to play the level in the game, instead of seeing a door, you'll end up seeing a black cube instead. Now, going back over to the inspector window, you'll see that we have a couple of features that we can mess around with. But for this video in particular, we're only going to focus on the type. And as you can see by clicking on it, we have a lot of options to choose from. But for this example, I'm going to make these right here floor grates. I'm also going to copy and paste them over. Probably make these drop-ins as well, so we can have like bad guys fall from the sky. And then lastly, for this one, I may make this one a double door, because why not? So, with the doors now covered, I say we add some lockers in here as well, because why not? Let me slap one in real quick. So for this locker in particular, I'm going to keep the type standard, but in the contents, you're going to want to change the 0 in this to 1 if the 1 is not already a 1 in this space right here. And then inside this little thingamajig, I'm also going to put M_katana, which will basically spawn a katana inside this locker. Now, given the time I have left, I won't be able to fully cover how I put weapons in these lockers to an extent in this video. I will in a future one, but in the meantime, if you were to mess around in Mad Card Maker for a little bit, I'm sure you'll eventually be able to find the names of the weapons you need to spawn them inside the lockers. Anyways, I'm gonna copy and paste this locker over here, make this a wide locker, replace the 1 with a 2, and then I'm gonna put what do I want to put in here? I guess I'll go for a Bison and a NK50. Alright, so that's probably good enough for right there. And then the last proxy I want to cover in this is, well, cover, which I will admit I don't fully know how the cover works in this to an extent, but I'll go ahead and slap some of these in anyways, just to kind of fill in the empty space right here. Give me 1 second. Alright, and now with the doors and proxies set up, I think now it's finally time to move on to the enemies, which we're gonna go back over to assets, library, and finally markers. This is where our waypoints and enemies are going to be found. And to start this off, I think I'm going to drag a character start into this. Now, when it comes to enemies in particular, they're probably going to be one of the most customizable things in the scene editor. And as you can see, there is a lot of stuff to mess around here. But for this video, I'm only going to touch the character assignment. We'll go more in depth with a lot of this in another video. So when it comes to character assignment, the MAD card refers to the traits, characters, and skills that a character has. And fortunately, inside the character selector here, their names happen to also be the names of their MAD cards as well. So for this character, we're gonna make him a grunt, and we'll just simply copy his name into the little MAD card space here. And then I'm also gonna copy and paste this guy over here and replace him with a, let's say, a golem. Give me 1 second. Alright, so moving on to the squad spawner, because while you can only do so much by placing down individual characters inside a room like this, the squad spawner turns your room into a wave-based arena. Now, while the customization isn't as extensive as the character start, there's still enough here to where I'm not going to be able to fully cover everything that's here. But for right now, we're basically going to focus on the text right here and also the wave selection. So starting off with the wave selection, we've got squads, which basically means how many waves run through the spawner, and max, which is basically the maximum amount of enemies that can be present in the room. So for this example in particular, I'm going to put in 10 squads and increase the max to 10. Now, size refers to how many types of enemies you want the spawner to spawn. So, for example, I could simply up the number of grunts in the spawner spawns and have it only be grunts, if that makes any sense. Or I can change the size from 1 to 5 and make the enemies coming in more diverse. So let's just say, let me open this up. What do we want to spawn in? Let's go for some bandits. Maybe some AHW agents. And how about some cultists as well? Why not? That's probably good enough. So let's go ahead and up the numbers on this just a bit too. Probably have like 20 each. I'll make it like 100 in total for this wave. And alright, with that being done, how's about we also adjust these sliders as well, just to kind of make them spawn in order, like have these have these grunts come first by giving them a small number, and like save some of these tougher guys for last by giving them a larger number. And anyways, and how's about we give them some weapons too, yeah? We're gonna go down here to weapon stockpile and change this from 0 to 3. Opening up this drop down, we have a bunch of options for weapons and whatnot, but for this example, I'll make the first two be ranged all, and then melee all, and then just leave the last one be unarmed. We're also going to change these zeros to a specific amount, which basically tells the spawner how many enemies can have like a weapon from like this class, if I guess you could call it. And then lastly, we're going to add in a boss, which is basically the most that's going to be the most customization for an enemy inside the spawner itself. But for this video, we're basically just going to make him a mag bandit, because why not? Anyways, the last thing that I want to touch inside the spawner is the patrol params, which basically links your spawner to the waypoints that are present in the room. So going over to that, we're going to click on patrol params, patrol pass, change that 0 to 1, element 0, change this to 0 to 1. And lastly, we're going to click on this very small circle here and show the waypoints in the room. And we're going to click on waypoint. Now, yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, while this may just be one waypoint in this room, I do feel that one is enough for a room that's as basic as this one. I'll go more into how waypoints work in another video, but yeah, this is pretty much good enough. Alright, and now a couple more things that we gotta do before we can wrap this up like a present and slap it under the tree, is that we gotta put all the stuff we added into the room layout and then mess with both the camera and these like red and blue dots here. So starting with proxies, we're gonna take every last one of them and then put them all into the room layout, which I'm gonna do that just real quick. Try and grab all of them and then slap them in just like so. Next, we're going to take our walls here and then slap them into background, which, I mean, they call it background. It's basically just the room itself, or like the terrain itself if you're making like an outdoor level or something. Anyways, lastly, we're going to take our characters here and our squad spawner and then just place them into characters like so. At this point, if we were to collapse this down, there should be nothing but the room layout itself and the dev cam. If that's the case, then we're going to move on to our final step. I usually save this step for last because if I want to go back and move something like, let's just say the wall, for example, or whatever, where there's like a bit of an overlap on one another, it makes it a complete utter pain to like make that flush while it's in the room layout, because of like, and when you put it in the room layout, it basically like changes the numbers and the position thingamajig or whatever. Anyways, we're gonna move these red and blue dots to the walls in our room by going over to layout here. These dots are used to stop the camera from moving out of the room itself, and by keeping them where they are now, the camera is basically going to be stuck in the center of the room. And frankly, we don't want that. So we're going to change that by moving the left border to the left wall, the right border to the right wall, the front border to the back wall, actually, and then our back border to the fourth wall here. Think of it like WASD, front, back, forth, left, and right. Think of it like that. Now, moving on to the camera target. Do not move this under any circumstance. If there is one thing that nearly every single beginner completely fucks up on, it's by instinctively moving this away from the camera and putting it in the center of their map, and then wondering what happened to their camera. This is because both the target and the camera point work together to make sure that the camera always stays on the character you're playing. By moving this, you end up throwing the whole thing off, and it causes the camera to tilt in directions that look away from the character. Now, if you happen to move this while following this tutorial or something, you can fix this by going to transform over here, putting in 0, 0, and 3.21 into the position selection just like this, and that should put the target back into its original position. Anyways, moving on to something we can actually move is camera point, and this one's pretty easy actually. This basically boils down to personal preference, but I'm going to change this to -22 and this to 12, just to kind of open things up and give myself a little bit of awareness of my surroundings, if that makes any sense. And then finally, we're going to move over to room layout itself and change the texture of the skybox. Yes, you can do that. And we're going to change it to black, like so. Here, give me 1 second. Let me get this. Okay. Now, as you can see, nothing has changed. And that's because the skybox, the lights, and the camera in our room need to be manually updated by hitting sync visuals. And just like that, our room is fully finished. So now, going back over to access, select your scene, make sure our asset bundle has a name, click on Madness right here, and create our asset bundle. Alright, so with our level now created, we're going to cut this, track down our mods folder, delete the old custom level, and then paste the new one in. So now this is going to conclude part 1 on our tutorial on making custom levels for MADNESS Project Nexus. Hopefully this made enough sense for you to follow pretty easily. I know I'm not exactly the greatest teacher in the world, nor do I have the most ASMR tier mic or voice. But the main thing that I wanted to achieve in part 1 was getting a good starting point for making a custom level in which its customizability being the most extensive that I have ever seen in any game that I've played. Anyways, next week is going to be part 2 of this tutorial, in which I go over linking rooms and also going into more detail into the layers for 3D objects and some of the prefabs that we used in this video. But until then, here is me going through the custom level that we made. I shall see you all later.